We still have the same as before, Mishpatim. In this Sikha, I mean, the Rebbe does this often, but in this Sikha, it's so much more pronounced that that's really the whole point in the entire Sikha, is to bring out that the things that are happening in the world are happening as a result of what's going on through our observance of Torah and mitzvahs. What we see is something happening. There looks like there are all sorts of reasons why that's happening that have nothing to do with anything but political changes. But really, it's all the result of what we're doing with Torah and mitzvahs. So here, the Rebbe is talking about the fact that the two superpowers in 1992 came together, and they said they were going to usher in a new era, an era of peace, which means no more wars, and let's get rid of as much as possible. And they did get rid of lots and lots of sort of nuclear weapons. I remember there was an article where the headline said, years ago, there was a race who could produce nuclear weapons faster than the other. And now the race is who can get rid of nuclear weapons. What's the best way to get rid of it? And they did get rid of a lot of these weapons. Not enough, but they got rid of it. And there was a movement constantly going forward in terms of not allowing countries to have wars. You know, we have a problem with Russia, of course, but that's an exception to what's going on. But in general, the world is still standing in that place. So the Rebbe is saying that this came as a result of what's happening in the world of Torah. That because there's more Torah study and we're spreading Torah and spreading Yiddishkeit and spreading especially Hasidus, this is preparing the world for Mashiach. And when Mashiach comes, we're going to see the fulfillment of a certain promise. What's the promise? That swords will be turned into plowshares. What we're witnessing is the beginning of that prophecy being fulfilled. That instead of spending money on tools of war and destruction, that money will go on the opposite, on food and improving the economic situation in the world. There are more details to this. I remember someone living here in the community called Professor Suman. He wrote some articles, but he wrote an interesting thing how a lot of the technology that they used only for war and they manufactured, except in fact, the GPS, I think, was established initially for war. Now look how it's helping us, just in life in general. And there's more things like that, like the precision targeting. They're using it now in medicine. If you're familiar with that. One of the big problems in medicine is that people who have that so-called dreaded disease is we have things that destroy it, but they also destroy the healthy tissue in the body, unfortunately. The person gets weak, and the immune system goes down, and that's unfortunately one of the reasons why many people with disease pass away, is because they become so weak, and a little cold can just take away their life. So now they have where they're able to target just the cells that are not healthy, and in such a way that nothing else gets damaged through it, which means they're using the same technology. But first the technology was used for war, now it's using for this. I also saw that there are certain places in the world where they can never get to, in order, that's like jungle area, places where you can't get to in order to make it into a normal place to live or a normal place that things can grow there. What do? They have also how they, from airplanes, they're able to project a certain, they shoot seeds into the ground, but from up there because they can't do it from the ground. Which means they're using technology that was used for wars and they're using it for positive things. Anyway, so the Rebbe says this comes as a result. And if we look, we see that the Rebbe says in our generation, the Rebbe always refers to the previous Rebbe as the one that's spreading Yiddishkeit, spreading Chassidus around the world. So the fact that this is all happening in a place which is near the headquarters of the Rebbe of the Nasi of the generation, that's where we can also notice the connection that what's going on in the United Nations and the way it's affecting the world in a positive way. The Rebbe wasn't a great supporter of the United Nations. The Rebbe said the United Nations is a dark place. You've probably seen those videos. But this was sort of a positive thing that they got together to reduce, arms production and weapons production, and to spend the money for these positive things. So it's a result of more Torah being spread, Sheva mitzvahs b'nei Noach being spread, that nations of the world will also accept Hashem and to live in a way which is the Torah wants us to live in a civil way, no killing, no stealing, no doing things that are not justice. And that's where we can see that. In order to explain better that the things that are happening in the world are really coming from what's going on in the Torah world, the spreading of Torah and the spreading of Chassidus, there's a few things here that Rebbe points to, but I want to go to page 175. Remember the Rebbe said that let's look at the place where it's happening, let's look at the time that it's happening. And one of the things that's happening in the time of Parsha Mishpatim, you see on top of the page it says Mishpatim. That everyone wants to speak about the connection between what's happening in the United Nations and the Parsha. So this is very common in the Rebbe's Sichos. When something happens out there in the world, the Rebbe says everything is by divine providence. What is the connection between what happened and the Parsha this week? Because that's sort of a message that Hashem is giving us. So this is David, page 175. As always, I'm going to read it in English, but I'm going to follow the text in the Hebrew. We can also connect this to the Parsha of the week, which is Mishpatim. This Parsha begins with these words, the Eila HaMishpatim Asher Tosem Lefneim. These are the laws that you should present before them. So Rashi asks a question, why does it say the Eila, and these are the laws? What is the and? It's a beginning of a Parsha. Where's the and come from? And means you said something before, and this also. It's a beginning, it's the first word of the whole Parsha. So Rashi says, but it's a continuation of the previous Parsha. What's the previous Parsha? The previous Parsha is Yisro. That's the Parsha where Hashem gave the Torah, the Aseret HaDibros. So Rashi says, Meisiv ala Rishonim, and this Parsha is a continuation of the first 10 commandments. Maharish, just like the first 10 commandments were given at Mount Sinai, so too these laws were also given at Mount Sinai, and therefore you should present it l'pneihem, before them and not before a secular court. Which means even if you know that a certain situation in Jewish law, that the secular court will rule exactly the same way like the Torah court, do not bring it to the secular court, but bring it to a Beis Din. In other words, the word mishpatim is specifically alludes to those commandments that are purely logical. As the Gemara says, even if the Torah wouldn't be given, just it would be decent human beings, we would understand not to kill and not to steal. And it's not stealing means that if someone gives me an article that I should watch it for them, I don't hold it back. I give it back to them. If I do damage to someone, I pay them money. All the laws that have to do with mishpatim in that parsha, laws of damage, laws of returning a lost object, and many other laws that are purely logical. They're all ethical, moral conduct, and the way human beings should act. And these are things that even without the Torah, we would have probably understood that this is what we need to do. On the other hand, the 10 commandments, everyone saw it, were on the mountain, and everyone saw Hashem speaking. It was clearly a revelation of God. So I would think that these commandments are not a revelation of God. We do them because it's just, logical, it's ethical, it's moral, and that's why you have to do it. So therefore, the Torah says, no, these mitzvahs should be observed, and you should know that they're just as much as those were given by God, these are also given by God. And that's why, if there is a question of how to deal with something, don't bring it to a secular court, bring it to a bezdin. So he explains now. The content of this parsha is like its name. Mishpatim means laws that deal mainly between Adam lechaveru, which means how people should interact with each other. And these things are things that are understood. It's you see this in bold. The seichel Adam, logic dictates that you shouldn't steal and you shouldn't kill and you shouldn't take something that belongs to another person. And this is the way it's quoted. Devarim ha'amurim b'Torah b'mishpat. There are things that are in the Torah that if the Torah wasn't given, you still would have known to do that. If not for the fact, if the Torah wasn't given, we'd learn tznius from a cat. We'd learn not to steal from an ant and so on. In other words, even animals by instinct follow certain things. But it means we'd be able to understand on our own. And not only do these things make sense, logical to a Yid, you would say, okay, Yid has a godly soul, something in him which is very godly, unique, and therefore it makes sense to him. No, these are things that make sense to everybody. Let's turn the page 176. Even logically, the logic of a non-Jew, the non-Jewish nation, also dictates that these are the way we should be acting. In fact, that's why in many laws it could be that the secular court will rule no different than the Torah court, because these are logical things. It's moral and ethical to do this or not to do that. And that's why the Torah begins with these words, Ve'ela mishpatim. You should know this comes from Sinai, which means even those laws that are purely logical, and logic dictates that we should observe them, nevertheless, we should observe them not because logic dictates, but because Hashem commanded us to observe them. But He also commanded us that we should observe them in a way that it should be perfectly logical to us. Let me explain what that means. The Gemara says that a person should say, really, I could eat this food which is not kosher. The only reason I'm not eating it is because Hashem said so. I could really go out and carry on Shabbos. The only reason I'm not is because Hashem said so. So we have to know that whatever we do is because Hashem said so. Now the question is, what about things that are moral and ethical? Should a person say, I could really kill somebody. The only reason I'm not is because Hashem said so. I could really steal people's money. The only reason not is because Hashem said so. No. When it comes to these commandments, part of the commandment is not only to do it because Hashem said so, but this should become our personality, that to me it's unacceptable as a human being to kill, to steal, to not honor parents, or whatever it is that is considered moral and ethical. So in other words, initially and originally all mitzvahs come from Hashem, and we have to do it because Hashem said so. But when it comes to the moral and ethical mitzvahs, part of the commandment is Hashem wants this to become our nature. When it comes to eating food that's not kosher, I don't have to be that my nature is I couldn't eat something which is not kosher. No, on the contrary, I can eat it. And the only reason I'm not doing it is because Hashem said so. These mitzvahs, that's why they're called mishpatim. Hashem wants it to become something which is like part of my nature and my personality, that these things that are immoral or unethical, I can do them because it goes against my nature to do it. It should become my nature to be kind, to be caring, to be compassionate, and not the opposite. So if a person says, oh, everything I do is for Hashem, so I could kill, but only because Hashem said so, I'm not going to kill, that's not, super devotion to Hashem. That's foolish. It's not what Hashem wants. But because these commandments and these laws are so logical, and it makes sense to Jews and to non-Jews alike, I would say, so what's the big deal if I go to a non-Jewish court if I'm going to get the same ruling anyway? Why is it a problem? And the answer is, the problem is because by us, even the things that we do that are logical, it's still connected to Hashem. And if I go to a secular court, I'm not connecting it to Hashem. I'm connecting it just to logic. If I go to a Torah court means the rabbis sit down, they look into Torah, and they say, this is what Hashem ruled. And that's why this message is only about mishpatim. When it's laws that are not logical, we don't need a special thing in the Torah to tell us that this comes from Hashem, because otherwise I wouldn't do it in the first place. No one else does this. It's dafka those things that everybody believes in, and everybody trusts, and everybody goes by these values, which are moral and ethical. That's where we need a special caution to remember we should do it because Hashem said so. So if someone goes to a secular court, that means I'm doing it because logic dictates, not because Hashem said so. And that's wrong. Everything we do, we should do because Hashem said so. Yeah.
So it's kind of like eating food. Like you can eat food without saying a bracha, but you're saying by like saying a bracha, you elevate it. So by thinking it's like a base that you're elevating it.
Yes. Yes. If you do something because Torah said so, that elevates whatever it is that I'm doing, and it connects me and whatever I'm doing to Hashem. Let's say there were two partners in a business, and we have an issue how to divide the field, how to divide the possession. And there's a logical way of doing it. So imagine if I can go to a secular court and they're going to say, well, partnership works like this. You get this and you get that, and that guy this and you get this. I go to a Torah court, they'll do the same thing. But if I do it in a Torah court, like you're saying, so I'm following what Hashem said. So by following that, I'm connecting to Hashem. I'm connecting my field to Hashem. I'm connecting my possession to Hashem by the fact that I'm dealing with it the way Hashem wants me to deal with it. And that's the purpose of what we're here for, is to connect ourselves and the world around us to Hashem.
So then, when you said like mishpatim is, the example you gave of the field, is that an example of like mishpatim? Is that
What?
the example you gave of the field, is that an example of like those halachas, like you were saying mishpatim, where you say Hashem wants to be part of our nature, if he doesn't want us to say, I could do it, but I won't, Hashem said, like.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, there might be little details there, that certain details. I'm gonna give you an example. Like, is it logical? Even people who are moral and ethical and logical, what would they say about Robin Hood's ideology? Is it okay to steal from the rich? Imagine if I have a way of getting into Bill Gates' account and I can take out $1,000 and give it to someone who's struggling like crazy. She's a single mom. She has 3 kids. The landlord wants to evict her. $1,000 will give her a few more months or whatever to stay in her apartment. Bill Gates will never know the difference. Why wouldn't it make sense logically to do it? Like stealing, but come on. This guy's not going to feel the pinch. He has billions, and $1,000 means nothing to him.
Yeah, but it's a now, and our soul, the freaking.
No, so I'm saying here's an area where you might say it's one of those logical things, but maybe the degree of it is a little bit in the secular world. You might find people that would say, I'm a moral person, I'm ethical, but how can I let this woman like go down with this person? Makes no difference. The Torah says, doesn't matter, it's not your money, and you can't take it. Maybe these kind of details will say, also, you need to say, that's what Hashem said. But for the most part, anything that deals with money issues and buying and selling and partnership and taking are things which are based on the basic principle that we have to do things in a way which is just, and we have to do things in a way that it's going to be fair for everybody. There definitely would be certain laws that even in these areas that maybe the secular court would rule different than a Torah court. And now the Rebbe is going to do something much deeper. I don't even remember the Rebbe ever explained it this way. A whole new explanation of these words, that the Mishpatim are a continuation of Sinai in a whole different way. So that's Hey on page 176. To explain this even deeper. When it says Eila Mishpatim, these are the commandments, the logical commandments, the moral and ethical commandments. and then we say these also come from Sinai, perhaps we can say there's a deeper meaning to this. What does it mean? That the reason why these laws make sense logically to every single person is because they were given at Sinai. And if not for the fact that Hashem gave these mitzvahs at Sinai, then human logic would not dictate that this should be the way it is. What does that mean? Okay. It is a little bit connected to our class that we had when we do Basti Lagani, where we explained that Hashem himself is infinite. And infinite means a realm that's beyond logic. That would mean that everything that Hashem says in the Torah, really its origin is not from a place of logic. Even laws like killing and stealing and those that are moral and ethical originally comes from a place that it's beyond logic. Not that it's not logical, which means it's foolish. No, it's beyond logic. It's from a place that's infinite. Nevertheless, mishpatim are mitzvahs that Hashem chose that they should manifest in this world in a way that they should make perfect sense. And other commandments, Hashem chose to leave it as something which we can't understand. So again, it originates in a place which is not logical, but it manifests in a way that it makes perfect sense in our mind and our heart that this is unacceptable, that this is something which I should do, I must do, makes perfect sense. So the Rebbe is saying now that when Hashem gave the Torah at Har Sinai and gave us those commandments which are logical, as a result of that, that's the deeper reason why these commandments make sense to every single person, even make sense to the nations of the world. Why? Because Hashem chose that these laws and these commandments, which originate in a place that's above logic, should become logical. And that's why it is. Which means the fact that you say, oh, this is logical, it makes perfect sense. But the reason spiritually why it makes perfect sense is because Hashem gave it at Har Sinai, gave it in a way that it should take on reason and logic. And since then, it became something which is perfectly logical for everybody else. So on one hand, is it logical? 100%. But what we're saying is, where does that come from? It comes from the fact that Hashem, in a sense, allowed something that comes from an infinite place to descend, to evolve in a way that it evolves and becomes part of the logic. I think last time we spoke about it, we gave this example, is like we have with ourselves certain things that we want, and the reason why we want it is just because we want it. But because I want it and I feel better if I have a good reason for it, it suddenly makes perfect sense to me. Which means really it's not because of this reason. Very often you find, this actually example is given in a Maimer, you find that somebody is always criticizing this other person for whatever they did. Why are they criticizing them? Because they did something wrong. What happens if you go to that person and you say, you did this and this, you're right, I should change, and he stops and changes it. Tomorrow is criticizing for a different reason. After tomorrow for another reason. Which means if this reason is gone, there's another reason. That reason's gone, there's a third reason. It's like a kid in school. Why aren't you paying attention? Because I'm sitting all the way in the back of the room and I can't listen to the teacher. Okay, they change your seat. Why aren't you paying attention now? I'm sitting too close to the teacher, it's too scary. I need a different seat. Okay, we'll change the seat. Why aren't you paying attention now? I'm too close to the window, so I'm looking outside too much. Okay. Every time you make what's really going on? Obviously, the kid is not paying attention for some other reason. These are all in his mind. Not that he knows that he's making excuses. It's something there, and that something takes on reason and logic, and it's rational to him that I'm doing it for this reason or that reason. But what we see is when you take away the reason, Rebbe once wrote this about anti-Semitism. When you ask and you look around why the non-Jews hated the Jews, you find that sometimes they said the reason why they hate the Jews, they have all the money and they're rich and they're controlling everything. Another place they say the reason they hate the Jews because they're the lowest class, they're poor, they're dirty, they're this, they're that. So why do you hate us? Because we're rich, because we're poor? And the answer is they hate us because it's just there's anti-Semitism. And the rich and the poor and these other things are just excuses to make it legitimate, to give it a license, to make it okay. Logic, it takes on a reason of logic, so it's kosher what I'm doing. Just an example of something which is really not logical. It's coming from a purely emotional place, but because subconsciously I want this to be okay, it takes on logic. I'm just giving an example of something which is not logic, could take on a form of logic. This is, of course, very different. We're saying that the mitzvahs of mishpatim are really things that come from an infinite place, but Hashem chose to allow them to take on a form of logic. So once that happened, now it's logical, and anybody could see the logic in it. Even a non-Jew could see the logic in it, even though he doesn't really have Torah, but he sees it as a logical thing.
That like us feel better, that we can think like it's satisfying us.
No, not because satisfying, because the deeper reason for this is Hashem wants us to have a dwelling place in this world. See, when I do mitzvahs, because Hashem told me to a certain extent, it's amazing. It shows that I'm submitting myself to his authority. But to a certain extent, it means I, my own, wouldn't do this. I'm doing because he said so. When I come to a place where my personality dictates to me to do what Hashem wants, that means that Hashem's commandment penetrated in a much deeper way. It became me. You see what I'm saying? So Hashem wanted that these mitzvahs should be done in a way that it penetrates people's personality, and that's the ultimate dira b'tachteidim, making the world a dwelling place for Hashem. Right. God could conserve with our logic. Logic? Seichel. Don't ask me about the seichel. הקדוש ברוך הוא רוצה שזה יבוא מאיתנו.
עבודת השם.
Right. So just like you understand that if you would force somebody to do mitzvahs and they would do the mitzvah, it's fine, they're doing the mitzvah, but they're not really doing it. On a final level, even if a person does mitzvah, not because they're forced, I'm happy to do what Hashem wants, but I myself personally don't get it. That means it's, to a certain extent, it's not totally coming from me. But if I get it, and my seichel, my personality, understands and feels and dictates that this is the way I should be doing it, then it means that the observance of these mitzvahs really penetrate my whole, every fiber of my being. Every part of me agrees with doing this and wants to do this.
We get there if we learn Torah.
Right, that you get there by understanding. The more you understand the mitzvahs, why that's why we make an effort, even things that are chukim, to try to understand as much as possible. Because when you understand something, that means that it's you that is sort of feels compelled to do this, not someone else is pushing me. I understand it. I feel it. Yeah.
Wait, can you explain? You're saying like that it penetrates deeper. It sounds like if it becomes part of our nature, it sounds like it's we're doing it because we want to do it, and it makes sense to us, and it sounds separate from Hashem.
No, but the fact that I'm making it my nature is because Hashem wanted me to do that.
Okay. And that's like the difference if like the secular court and the base we get the same ruling, but you go to the base
If you go to the secular court, it has nothing to do with Hashem. It's just a system of this civil, order, and it has nothing to do with Hashem.
So like an example would be like not murder. That makes sense more like even we're saying non-Jew, like fake law.
Right.
So for the Jew,
Hashem wants it to make sense, but I still know that this is from Hashem, and and it makes sense to me, and I want to understand that it's not to understand, but I want it to be part of my personality. that something like this is out of the question. I would never do anything like that. Imagine if you feel like that about not embarrassing somebody, about not hurting somebody's feelings, being kind to people. That also goes into that category. But if someone could say, listen, I don't really feel like helping him, but Hashem said so, I'll do it. Or you actually develop a sensitivity to care for the other person. And then but I'm doing because Hashem said, because if I end up doing things because I feel that way, then when I'm in a situation where I'll have a big gain or a big loss, suddenly I'll be thinking differently. That's that. If I do it because Hashem said so, it's fixed. I know I won't deviate.
So we can only do this with something, like you couldn't do this with like postures, like it can become part of your nature, but only like, to not even be like brave, like if you see a guy doing like non-kosher food, like to be like, oh, it's not even tempting, so far my
At the end of the day, it's not tempting because I'm so used to not eating this kind of food. But the idea that a person should say, really, that the reason why I don't eat this food because I can't stand, and just like you have certain foods that you don't like, everybody has food they don't like. That's how I feel towards things that are not kosher. But it's not meant to be that way. It's meant to be that you should do it because Hashem said so. And mishpatim are meant to be that it becomes my personality. All the mitzvahs that are apisechel.
Yeah.
Lo the gnov, lo the hakot, lo the harog, that's a shalom.
So. שזה אמור להיות.
הקדוש ברוך הוא רוצה שזה יהיה חלק מהטבע שלי. לא שבן אדם יגיד, אני יכול להרוג בן אדם, אבל הקדוש ברוך הוא אמר לא, אז אני לא הורג. No, I should become my nature. I should become a kind person. I should become a sensitive person and so on. But I guess the what?
מצוות לא השניות.
מצווה שלא משפטים, אני עושה רק בגלל שקדוש ברוך הוא אמר לי לעשות את זה.
אבל זה גם אמור להיות חלק
Yeah, but the fact that Hashem told me to do it, I should do it with passion, with love, with feeling, with emotion. But again, it doesn't mean that I develop an emotion to shake leaves of a palm tree, you know. I'm doing it because Hashem said so. So the reason why this is unique is because on the simple pshat we learn, yeah.
Like for the laws that don't make logical sense, like is that still like ultimate there's not telling you know you don't do it with your whole personality? Things like that, is there a difference?
There is a difference that yes, to a certain extent, that's why Hashem, those are the mitzvahs I should do it with passion. But the passion is because Hashem wants me to do it, so that in that way it's b'tachtonim, because my heart and my soul want to do it. But yes, mishpatim have an advantage that they're more dear b'tachtonim, because that becomes my personality. It does. The advantage in the other mitzvahs are that even though it's not my personality, I'm still listening to Hashem. So there's a higher level of bittul, if you want to use that word. There's more of sort of my submitting myself to Hashem by doing something which I don't understand. But the more diri v'tachtenim is something that I do understand and I feel for it. So Hashem gave us both. They have both advantages. Like the one says the question, which mitzvahs do you enjoy most? Those that you don't understand or those that you do understand? What should be the right answer? So to a certain extent, the right answer should be, I really enjoy more to do the mitzvah I don't understand. Because when I do something I do understand, I feel that's me. When I do something which I don't understand, I feel more that's Hashem. But again, even the thing that I do because that's me should also be because of Hashem. But the me part is more pronounced in the logical ones than in those that are above logic. So each mitzvah has their, that's why Hashem gave us two kinds of mitzvahs to have both advantages. So what's unique about this whole piece is, which I said it's something new that I've introduced here, is not only that we should do the logical things because Hashem told us, but something deeper. The reason why it makes sense is from Sinai, because Hashem in Har Sinai decreed that these commandments should make sense. That's why it makes sense in everybody's brain. That's the thing that the Rebbe is adding here, and we'll soon see how that relates to Mashiach. I don't think we should have this class tomorrow because we're going to forget next week. Hopefully not how we got to it. But this is the chiddush, that the fact that it makes sense in my brain is not because, well, of course it makes sense. No, it's because Hashem took these commandments and he allowed them to take on logic and reason, and that's why it makes sense to all human beings that this is something logical. That's where it comes from.
So by that logic, we could have taken like any of the mitzvahs.
Yes,
And made those.
absolutely, right.
For all we know, like Kashrus could have made logical sense and not.
Yes.
Puerto Rican could have-
Hashem could have taken like milk and meat and made that so logical, it make perfect sense, and would make sense to everybody. How could you eat milk and meat together? It would be the same thing. Yeah.
Wow.
Okay, to be continued. Have a good Shabbos, everybody. How are we gonna manage without Hanukkah? I don't know. Is this a beautiful done? Yeah.
השם רוצה שנבין את התורה והמצוות אותם כאילו יותר מרצון, שזה מדובר רק על המצוות לא תעשה, כמו שאמרת.
יש מצוות שזה הגיוני. כן? יש מצוות שזה לא הגיוני.
שזה המצוות לא תעשה.
אפילו מצוות זה. למשל, מצוות כזהו, שצריכים לנענע את הלולב ואת אתרוג. למה לולב? למה אתרוג? אני מבין, זה זכר ליציאת מצרים, אבל סוף כל סוף זה לא הגיוני, כמו שאני צריך לעזור לבן שהוא חולה, לקיים מצוות ביקור חולים ומשהו כזה.
אוקיי.
And then he said there is that too, but
So יש
I ran out of room.
יש מעלה במה שאני לא מבין, יש מעלה במה שאני כן מבין. המעלה במה שאני לא מבין, אני מבטל את עצמי לקדוש ברוך הוא יותר. המעלה כשאני עושה מצוות שזה הגיוני, וזה שכלי, וזה, איך אומרים, מוסרי, דבר נכון לעשות, דברים כאלו, כשאני עושה את זה, אז זה השיעיות שלי, שאני מבין ואני מרגיש לעשות דברים כאלו.
כן, אז הביטול זה יותר שאנחנו לא מבינים.
כן.
אוקיי. איזה קטע?
אבל איפה האישיות שלי יותר מעורב בזה, זה במצוות שאני כן מבין. אישיות means personality.
אז מה,
right?
מצווה לנענע השוערת, זה כאילו מצווה ביטול.
זה ביטול, כן.
באמת?
לא, אני גם, יש לי אהבה ויראה והכל, אבל בגלל שזה לא דבר שהשכל מחייב לעשות את זה, אז אני מרגיש יותר שאני עושה בגלל שהקדוש ברוך הוא אמר. אבל כשאני נותן משהו לבן אדם לעזור לו, אני עוזר לבן אדם שנפל,
כן.
אני עושה את זה בגלל שזה the right thing to do. אני לא מרגיש כל כך, הקדוש ברוך הוא, אני מרגיש שאתה רוצה להיות